Okay, so we will be looking at some review material from your workbooks. We're going to start by reviewing fractions. So I am on the section that has a title Review of Fractions. Notice that these problems have been worked out already, but I like to still provide my my solution here so you can also see how all of these problems were solved, and perhaps the way I solve it is a little different than what you will see here on the workup book, but you decide what approach you prefer. So let's begin. Let me write down the problem and then I'm gonna show you my screen, but let me first write down the problem. So number one, we have 5/6 minus 2/3 plus 3/4. And so I will not work every single problem on the workbook. Basically, what I will do is I will work a problem, and if as a model, and so that you have a model, so you can do a similar problem following the the sample I give you. Okay, so let me stop sharing here, and now you should be able to see my paper. Okay. And so notice that you have three fractions, and we need to find the least common denominator here before we can subtract and add. So whenever you're adding and subtracting fractions, you need to find the LCD, and this is called the least common denominator. So when you look at the denominators here, you're looking at 6, 3, and 4. You're looking for the number that all three numbers, 6, 3, and 4, can go into with a remainder of 0. So 6 needs to go into that number, 3 needs to go into that number, and 4. And notice that's going to be 12, right? So 6, 3, and 4, they all go into 12 with remainder 0. So this is going to be the LCD is 12, right? And so now what you're going to do is you're going to look at the fractions here. So you're gonna multiply. So 5/6, you're gonna multiply by the number that you need in order to get 12 as a denominator. So bring down minus 2/3, multiply by 2, and then plus 3/4, multiply, right? So 6 times 2, and whatever you do to the denominator, you're gonna do to the numerator. Okay, 3 times 4, times 4 times 3, there, and then you multiply. Okay, so 5 times 2, you multiply numerator times numerator. 5 times 2 equals 10. 6 times 2 equals 12. Minus 2 times 4 equals 8. 3 times 4 equals 12. And now plus 3 times 3 equals 9. 4 times 3 equals 12. Okay, so you have now the same denominators, notice. And so now you can perform the operations, because like I said, whenever you're adding and subtracting fractions, this is always when you're adding and subtracting fractions, you need to have the least common denominator. So now that you have just one denominator, you can write 12 as the denominator, and then you write 10 minus 8 plus 9, right? So that's going to equal, now you perform these operations from left to right. 10 minus 8 equals 2, right? Plus 9 equals 11, right? So you have 11/12. And you always check to see if you chose the least common denominator. You want to check that. You did that. And then 11/12, this cannot be reduced because 11 is prime. 12 is not prime. So they don't have any common divisors, common factors. So that's the lowest terms. That would be the final answer for number 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and share our screen back to the workbook. And I will be doing this. So I will be sharing my screen so you can see which questions I have. And then okay, so you need to follow. I recommend you follow also. You have your workbooks open. So number 2 is the same process. So you can do the same, apply the same method I showed you for number 2. Now, let's move on to multiplying fractions. So remember, before you move on to multiplying fractions, remember that if you're adding and subtracting fractions, it requires that you find the least common denominator. For multiplying and fractions, you don't need this to find the LCD, the least common denominator. But I'm going to show you an approach technique I use when I'm multiplying fractions that saves time. And you choose if you decide to use it. I recommend it. So let me go ahead and write down the problem. And number 3. 16 over 7. I do recommend that when before you jump to the questions on the homework, that you watch the videos. I'm gonna try to make the videos not too long. Okay, so what I'm gonna try to do is just pick a good number of problems that are gonna model your homework well, so that you have a guide before you start working on the homework assignments. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop sharing so you can see what I'm writing. So we have 16 over 7 times 3 over 8. So no need to worry about the least common denominator. Here, all you need to do is try to see before you multiply, because see, the way we multiply fractions is we multiply them, we multiply the numerators together. We would do 16 times 3 and then 7 times 8, right? But before you do that, you always need to, well, you don't really need to do this, but I recommend you do. Try to, I call this the diagonal reduction. So you see the diagonals here. So look at the diagonals here, 8 and 16, and then 3 and 7. And let's work with the 8 and 16 and see if you find what's the largest number that goes into both 8 and 16. And you know 2 works, 2 goes into 8 and 16, but that's not the largest number. 4 works, but that's not the largest number. 8 goes into both. 8 goes into 8 one time, and 8 goes into 16 twice. So you can use 8 and say, okay, 8 goes into 8 one time. So I'm going to scratch this out and write one time. And then 8 goes into 16 twice. So I'm going to scratch this out and write 2. And you try the same thing with 3 and 7, but notice that there's both of those are prime numbers, so they don't have any common factors because they're prime numbers. So then you can just say, okay, so that's it. We need to multiply now. So then you multiply the numerators. 2 times 3, 6, and then 7 times 1. And in one step, kind of, you're done, and you have the fraction already reduced in lowest terms. Now, let me share my screen back to the workbook. You see how number 3 is very long. They go through a lot of different steps here. You can follow this approach if you want, but I think that the approach that I show you is much shorter. So you decide. So I'm going to do number 4 also, so you can see how it is applied to both of the diagonals. If whenever you can do it to both, make sure you do it. So let me write down the fraction, 22 over 45 times 5 over 11. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, remember to do the diagonals. Okay, don't forget to do this when you're multiplying. Now, can you do this every time? Only if it's multiplication. So can you do it to division? Not until the operation changes to multiplication. So it only applies to multiplication. So we begin. Okay, so 11 and 22. 11 goes into 11 one time. 11 goes into 22 twice. 5 goes into 5 one time. 5 goes into 45 9 times. So we're done with that. And we can just multiply. 2 times 1 is 2. 9 times 1 is 9. And you're done. Okay. So if you do this, it'll save you a lot of time. Okay, I'd ask you if you have questions, but you're not here, so how can I ask? Anyway, if you do have a question, just because you're taking a course online, it doesn't mean you don't have access to your professor, right? You can always email me, and if you need a tutoring session, private tutoring session, one-on-one tutoring session, you can ask for one. I'm available during my office hours. Those are posted in the syllabus, and always email me first to confirm because, I need to set up a time just to meet with you, whoever's emailing me. And also you have access to the tutors in Math World. They're awesome tutors there. And the link is in your Canvas course. All right. All right. So we're done with the multiplication of fractions. Simple step. Notice how if you look at number 4 here, they go through a lot of steps here, but we did it in one step pretty much. Okay, division. Same thing as multiplication, but we need to, the idea of division when you're dividing fractions is to turn to change the division into a multiplication problem so that you can apply this technique, right? So I'll do one and then you do the other one for practice. Now, this video is just going to be on the review. So I'm going to cover all of the review topics that you will be doing for review for your course. So I recommend you watch these videos, right? And in the presentation that I'm going to do for the intro, I will make sure that I stress that. Okay, I stress that you watch the videos before you go to the homework. And so we changed the book. So now you get to see the professor, you get to see me working the problems. Before it was a combination of professors, but now it's just going to be me. So you'll get one professor working all of the questions that are in the videos. You're not going to see different professors. So I know sometimes that confuses the students, and that's not going to be the case in this course. Okay, so, okay, division of fractions. Let me write down the problem. So I'm going to do number 5, and you guys can do number 6. By the way, and give me feedback on the videos, because if I'm moving too fast, or if it's, you can always pause. Okay, you can always pause. I'm gonna post these in YouTube. Also, there's a YouTube channel I have. Well, I have 2 of them, but one is specific for math. It's SPC. I think it's SPC Rocio, that's SPC-MATH, something like that. And I'm gonna be posting these videos there. So if once the course is over and you need them, to help your, I don't know, if you have children, whatever, feel free to watch them. It will be there. Okay, so number 5, 6/5 divided by 4/7. And let me stop sharing. So this one, this is a division operation. So this division operation is going to change to multiplication, but how? Well, the first fraction you don't change. Okay, you keep it the way it is. So bring that down 6/5, and you're going to the second fraction, you're going to invert the second fraction, meaning you're gonna change the numerator and denominator in terms of their position. Like the numerator becomes the denominator and the denominator becomes the numerator, like that. Okay. Once is a multiplication, and remember, only the second fraction. Okay, that's all, not the first one. Once is multiplication like that, let me write it here on the side. Once you have it in the right form, then you can apply the diagonal technique, see if you can reduce. The 7 and the 5s, you can't reduce because those are prime numbers. 4 and 6 do have 2 in common, so 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. And then you can multiply now. 3 times 7 equals 21, 5 times 2 equals 10, and it would give you the lowest terms. If you look at the workbook here, 21/10 is the answer. They go through a lot of steps here, but we did it in a very short amount of time. Okay. All right. Now, page number 2. Make sure you. This is the TI. Oh, let me show you here. Let me stop sharing. This is the calculator we're going to be using. You will, if you want to borrow one from the Department of Engineering and Mathematics, the information will be available or is available in your Canvas course. So there is a form you need to complete, you need to fill out the form. Once you have the form, you take the form to the right place, and all the instructions are going to be in your Canvas course and your modules. But this is basically the calculator we're going to be using, and there's a section in the workbook that deals helps you to practice with this calculator. So let me show you here. Let me page 2. So I recommend you work these problems for practice. So you know, just go through the problems. The instructions are here, you know, like how to enter. So you can, the problems I just worked, you can try to do them with a calculator, but I do recommend that you know them, how to do them, how to do them by hand, okay, also. Okay, so we're gonna skip all this, and we're gonna move on to the review of sine numbers, okay? And this is important too, because sometimes, you know, we get confused with the different signs. So just a little bit of review on this. So let me write down the topic here. So review of sine numbers. Okay, and let me write down some of the problems. Like I said, I'm not going to cover all of them, but let me write down some of them. So I'm going to do number 1, number 3, and then number 5, number 7, and then let's work those first, and then I'll keep working the rest. Okay, so how do you deal with sine numbers, right? Well, numbers of different signs. So of course you can use your calculator, but if you want to perform these operations by hand, you do this from left to right, right? You read this from left to right. You have -5 plus a -8. So I always tell the student, you know, think of these numbers that have different signs as money. If you have like a balance of -5 in your checking account, and then you add another withdrawal, you're adding another negative. So of course the answer is going to be negative, right? So it's like, okay, -5 plus another negative. So you're adding 2 negatives. So it makes sense that you'll get another negative, right? Now, this is the same as if I write same as -5 minus 8, same thing. You know, I don't have to write plus negative, but it means exactly the same thing. This is still going to be -13, right? So now if you're adding 2 numbers of the same sign, the sign remains. If you're adding 2 numbers of the same sign, the sign remains, right? Notice here for number 3, I'm adding a number that has a positive sign and one that is a negative sign. So if I add a positive and a negative, then I know that I may not get, I may end up with, it depends on which number has more value, it depends. So I have a 12 and I'm adding a negative. So if you think, like, you know, on the number line, you can think of this on the number line. If here, let's say that this is at 12, you're over here, we're here, right, 12. But if I add a negative, I'm moving to the left 2 places. So then I'm now at 10, right? Because I'm moving to the left. When I add a negative to a positive, we're moving to the left, but the 12 is much stronger. So I still end up with a positive sign, right? So it will give me +10, right? Now this one, -3 minus 6, is the same thing as if you write, well, we know this is going to be -9 because this is the same as if I write -3 plus -6, right? It's like adding 2 negatives. That's going to give me a -9. And then notice something on number 7. how the negative next to a negative, like together like that, makes it a positive here. And then you have a negative plus a positive. So if you, on the number line, if we are here at -7 and we add 9, say, we're gonna add 9. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So let's see. -7, -6, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, right? So you end up at 2. So we end up at 2 here. Well, let me raise this a little bit so you can see. Sorry about that. And so you get the idea, right, of how you need to be very careful with numbers that have different signs. So that was 1 through 7. Let's see what else we have when we look at the workbook. Okay, we can do, let's look at multiplying and dividing, because these have to do with addition and subtraction. So with multiplying and dividing sign numbers, let's see. So, well, the rule is when you multiply two negative numbers, the answer is positive. And when you multiply one negative, one positive, the answer is negative. The same thing with division. So let me work a few. So we have -3. Let me just write them down. I'm going to do 9, 11, and then some of the division problems I want to do also. So let me do 10 and 12. So 16 divided by -8, and then -35 divided by -5. And then also I want to do these 13 and 14 also because of sometimes it's confusing on the negative where it is placed, okay? Okay, so let me stop sharing so you can see. All right, so this is number 9. So remember what I said, a negative times a negative gives us a positive, so it's going to be positive 18. A negative times a positive gives us a negative, so it's negative 22. Now, let's do the 10 and 12, and then I'll get to these two. 16 divided by -8, a positive divided by a negative is a negative, so that gives us -2. And then a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that gives us a +7. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, just like a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, these I always like to cover them because the students sometimes get confused by, they think they're the same and they're not. You see, the parentheses here makes the difference because this parentheses here is telling the reader that the -2 is a base, right? Versus there's no parentheses here, so that means that the 2 is a base. And that makes a difference when you multiply because for number 14, for example, -2 is being multiplied 4 times by itself. And when you multiply a negative number, an even number of times, the result is always positive. So this is going to give me a +16 because I'm multiplying -2 4 times by itself. This one is not the same because this means that there's a -1 in front of the 2. And so 2 is being multiplied, not -2, but 2 4 times. This is going to make a difference because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 equals 16, but times -1 is -16. And so the answers will not be the same because of the parentheses. So if the parentheses is rounded and you're multiplying a negative number, you're going to raise it to an even power, the answer will be positive. But if you don't have a parentheses around it, it's going to give you a negative, okay? Just remember that. It's very important that you remember this rule. And that ends the sign numbers discussion. Again, there's another section here on the calculator, so make sure you look at that and practice. And then we're going to look at the review of the order of operations. This is the last part of the review material that I want to cover, okay? Just a few problems here. I'm going to do these 2 problems, both of them. so that we can review the order of operations. And then that would be the end of the video. Like I said, I'm not gonna make these videos long because I don't think you need long videos. You just need good problems, good explanations, right? Okay, so the order of operations, let me write down. Right here, the title. I will explain. Let me write down the problem. Again, you can do this with a calculator, but I want to show you how to do this by hand following the order of operations, which is very important that you remember to follow whenever you're doing these types of questions, right? And any sort of math that has to do with these operations. All right, so let me stop sharing my screen so you can see what I have here. Now the order of operations, pandas, says that we need to do parentheses first, then exponents. Multiplication and division come together, and I will explain what that means. Addition and subtraction come together. Now, which one from multiplication and division and from addition and subtraction, which one do you do first? The one that shows up first from left to right. Okay, so when you read the problem from left to right, if division, like in this case, division comes before multiplication, then you do division. But if multiplication comes before division, then you do multiplication, right? The same thing with addition and subtraction, so the order matters. Okay? All right, so we're gonna start here with parentheses first. Now notice that there are no parentheses, so I don't have to worry about parentheses. I'm gonna put a check mark there. Now I do have exponents, so I need to simplify that. So notice that you have the 3 square and the 7 square. So 3 square and 7 square. So you can write down 45 divided by 3 square is 9, right? Times, and write everything else the way it is. And then 7 square is 49, okay? So then you're done with the parentheses and the exponents, right? Now you can also take care of the square root. So square root of 25 is 5. So you can just write 45 divided by 9 times 5 plus 3 times 49, like that, right? Okay, and then multiplication and division. Well, notice that from left to right, division shows up first. So I'm going to take care of the division first. So 45 divided by 9 equals 5. So I'm going to write 5. Bring everything else down. Right, so division was done first before multiplication. And then you have multiplication and addition. So you're going to multiply first, and it doesn't matter which one you do, but you always, you do this from left to right. So 5 times 5 equals 25, right? Plus 3 times 49. So 3 times 49, that's 147, right? When you multiply these two, right? And then you add the 2, so 25. I was just double checking to make sure that I didn't make a mistake. Then you add the 2, you get 172, right? When you add the 2. And so remember to, let me share my screen here. So that's how you do this operation. So you check to make sure you did it right, or 172, right? And that's it. So we check it to make sure it's right. Okay, so that's number 1. And then number 2, let me do number 2. Let me write down. Be careful with number 2 because it has a lot of decimals. So 6. I'm going to be making, like I said, the videos, like right now it's, so your class is going to start in August. So I'm already making these videos before so that they're ready. Right now is June, what's today? Let me tell you, June 27th. Today is June 27th. So 11 minus 3 squared. You want to prepare for the fall semester. When you're writing these down, don't forget the parentheses, all of that. Okay, so let me double check to make sure I wrote it right. So minus 1.2 parentheses 11 minus 3, and then you square that divided by, okay, all right. So let me stop sharing here now. Always, I know I need to do this so I can remember. I write down PEMDAS so that I remember what I need to focus on, and I don't skip, you know. Let me drink some water. Okay. All right, so you're gonna work from the inside out. From the inside out. Parentheses first, right? So that's number 1. So from the inside out, 11 minus 3 is equal to 8. So put parentheses around it because I'm gonna be multiplying, right? So bring down everything else. Make sure you copy it carefully. So 11 minus 3 equals 8, right? I'll bring that down, everything, and then everything's in a parentheses still, raised to the second power, divided by, you can take care of this parentheses also. So you have a negative 1.3 minus negative 1.3 minus 0.5 gives you a negative 1.8. So I can just write that. Okay, parentheses. Now, you're still working inside this parentheses. The next operation, you're working inside this parentheses is to multiply, right? So we're going to multiply because there are exponents, but you're still working inside a parentheses. You're still working under the operation of parentheses. So you still have to do this part. So you're going to multiply. So you have 0.7, let me bring down the minus, multiply 0.2 times 8, right? Which is 1.6. Notice I brought down this minus here, right? So the 0.2 times 8 is 1.6, bring down the minus, that's gonna be square, bring that down. Divided by negative 1.8, okay? You're still working inside the parentheses, we're not done. So 0.7 minus 1.6 is a negative 0.9, right? Bring down the 6 squared, bring down the negative 1.8, okay? Now we go to exponents because we're done with parentheses. So the exponents, we need to raise this negative 0.9 to the second power. And that gives me 0.81, right? Bring down the 6 divided by negative 1.8, right? So now we're done with exponents. And then we multiply or divide depending which operation comes before. From left to right, we see that it's multiplication, right? So you're going to multiply 6 times 0.81. Gives me 4.86 divided by negative 1.8, right? And so then you go ahead and divide, divided by negative 1.8, and you get negative 2.7 because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And there's a lot of work there, so take your time when you're doing this. Don't rush. And let me share my screen here. And we get negative 2.7. There it is. Okay, and so we see that there it is, you know, all the work. Let me erase it a little bit so you can see the top. There's the top. And then there's the bottom. Okay, so we are done with the review material. I will be uploading the other sections very soon. So thank you for watching, and you can always go back and watch it again, okay? All right, you guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye.